Here we go again. The Jazz fuck it up again. Welcome to the Salt City Hoops Live podcast. I'm your host, Mark Pereira. I hate the Jazz. There's also live postcast and beer. The beer I'm currently drinking is not what's on screen because I have to finish the beer that I did not hastily drink enough before I pour the beer that you see on screen, which I have ready to go any second now. Jazz blew it against a Luka Doncic-less Dallas Mavericks team, and I am fairly despondent as to what occurred. There are two. You get to the playoffs, and a lot of these wins that you see from series to series, they aren't like regular season games insofar as you really get some pretty unusual results from players or outcomes or minutes that you see or guys come in that you don't expect. Just guys show out and play. This isn't a Jazz thing uniquely. We point a lot to Terrence Mann. We'll get to Jalen Brunson in a minute, I promise you. We get to things like Terrence Mann scoring 30 points. Like, those are aberrations. A lot of these happen in a lot of different series, and that's how a team wins a title, is unexpected performances from guys you don't expect, or shutting down guys in ways you don't expect, holding a star to 10 points or 15 points or something like that. So when a clearly outclassed Dallas Mavericks team loses in the playoffs to a healthy Utah Jazz team, you immediately go to the box score and say, what the fuck happened? Like, well, give me two or three things that happened today that really just define why this entire game was the way it happened. And when you look at just the simple box score, not plus minus, I'll spare you advanced stats, rating, all that stuff, and you see, holy shit, Maxi Kleber, 8 of 11 from the field, but that was 8 of 11 from 3. And Maxi Kleber is ostensibly a stretch big. He can shoot threes. He's capable from 3, but he's a 30 to 35% three-point shooter who's on a massive cold streak of late. He shot 80% today from 3. He shot 8 3-pointers today. And that might not be the first thing you notice. How about the second thing you notice? Well, Mike Conley played 22 minutes, and he scored 0 points. Mike Conley is our third best player, ostensibly. I love that word, ostensibly. That's what it's supposed to be. That's what you would assume. That is, based on the facts provided, you would say, Mike Conley is our third best player. He was an all-star last year. I mentioned it in a Salt City Hoops article the other day. I think this year kind of showed like the first real decline in Mike Conley's skills, but we don't go from all-star to 0 points in 22 minutes in a first-round playoff game. We'll get to him in another minute. I mentioned Jalen Brunson, who I said we would get to in a minute. Well, I'll talk about his minute. He scored 41 points today. He had 8 rebounds and 5 assists. 41 points, 8 rebounds. No turnovers. Not a single turnover for Jalen Brunson. He was 15 of 25 from the field, 6 of 10 from 3. You get to the point with, like, their starting point guard, Jalen Brunson, skilled player, is going to make a ton of money this offseason. But he's a starting point guard in the NBA. He's probably, if you were looking at these two teams in February or March, you would probably look at them and say, well, Jalen Brunson's probably a little bit better than Mike Conley, as far as like their ability to impact the game and who they are as point guards. And we got Conley going for 0 points and Brunson going for 41. Right? Conley's not a 41 points per game player, but with Brunson, if he's going to score 41 points, do you think that's going to be off of 30 shots, like the 30 that Donovan took today? Do you think that he's going to have a single fucking turnover today? Like, we're going to pressure him on the ball, we're going to put 2 on the ball and make him just play pure point guard, which he's not super amazing at yet in his young career, right? Like, if we can't guard the point of attack, let's just get the ball out of his hands. Side note, Daniel House today, when he was guarding Brunson, was fabulous at denying him the ball. I recall fondly when you're playing like middle school or even like junior varsity soccer, right? And there's just like one kid who's like way better than everyone else. They will just say, hey, just stick random guy who has a bunch of energy and might not be worth a shit. Just I don't care if the ball is 40 feet away. You just stay at his hip. Just don't let him get the ball, right? And no matter how good that defender was at the actual game of soccer, that guy was good at preventing that player from getting the soccer ball. And that good junior varsity soccer team all of a sudden went to shit. And today, Daniel House actually did a pretty good job at denying Jalen Brunson the basketball entirely. You can't play defense like that for 48 minutes. I'm not expecting them to. Jalen Brunson played 42 minutes today, notably. There has to be a little bit better, more urgency with the perimeter defense. Quinn Snyder threw a random personnel quirk at us in the fourth quarter to try to see if we can do something different. Jordan Clarkson, Jordan Clarkson started the second half And also we had a closing lineup some midway through the fourth quarter that was really an amalgamation of guys that we really haven't seen play together a whole lot, that involved Mike Conley off the floor. I mentioned that Mike Conley only played 22 minutes today. He was as bad offensively as he was defensively. I wouldn't go as far as to say Conley was unplayable today. My main issue will rest with Royce O'Neal and tasking Royce O'Neal to guard Jalen Brunson, which he did most of the game. From the jump, it was Royce O'Neal's task to guard Jalen Brunson, and I just think that is asinine to me. That is just simply asinine. Royce can't guard the quickness. He cannot guard players that quick. Dorian Finney-Smith and players of his ilk, these long forwards, these long small forwards, these long power forwards, they give guys like Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell trouble because even if they get beat, they have the length to contest these shots. And you know what? They don't even get beat that often because they're quick and rangy and they really stay in front of guys and make life miserable for a Conley or a Mitchell. Royce O'Neal doesn't do that. Royce O'Neal's defensive skill is guarding forwards. He really is good at getting contests in there. He's strong as an ox. He plays way bigger than a 6'4" frame. The 230-pounder cannot guard these slide small point guards. And I'm so fucking sick of it watching it happen. It all started two playoffs ago against the Denver Nuggets when we had Joe Ingles and Royce O'Neal tasked with guarding Jamal Murray, and he goes off for 50 points every fucking game, it felt like. We knew then that the option is not just hoping what you did 3 years ago worked. There was a time when Royce was youthful and just he guard big and small. He just can't do the small thing anymore. And it's just mind-blowing to me that we still watch it. So all the issues we see this week with Mike Conley's not being able to guard Jalen Brunson, it just at this point I'm more comfortable sending doubles at the ball handler, whether it be Dinwiddie, Brunson, or Luka Doncic when he comes back, and letting Rudy Gobert, the best defensive player in the league, more on that in a minute, guard two guys at once, which he is capable of. If you think back 3 playoffs ago in the Houston Rockets series, the task was Ricky Rubio or a different ball or perimeter defender would guard James Harden in a way that said, James Harden, you're not shooting threes, and we're not fouling you. We are going to let you waltz into the paint, have Clint Capella with your lob hand, and then he's a left-hander, or shoot right-handed layups. And Gobert defended that action for 5 games, as good as you can ask for. Gobert is just as good as he was 3 seasons ago in that respect. And I thought Gobert would dominate the series because as good as Kleba and Powell are in their own respective ways, they can't bother Rudy Gobert above the rim. So let me get to what I'm promising. This, in case anyone gives a shit, this is a Dunkelweiss beer from Prost Brewing here in Denver. German Dunkels. Dunkels are my favorite type of beer to drink. I don't think Prost is a particularly good one, but it's flavorful. I like to drink these during Jazz games. But let me get to the beer on the screen. So, Breckenridge Brewery, Strawberry Sky. It's delicious. It tastes like strawberries. And we're going to hang out with it. We're going to drink it. Thanks for everyone joining Salt City Hoops live postgame and beer. I'm going to promise you a postgame after every Jazz game. That was a really shitty pour. I don't care because I'm upset. And we're going to have a beer. It's Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. I don't give a shit. We're having a beer and talking. Win or lose, we're going to talk about this game. Jonathan Diesta asks, why didn't Quinn sub in House and Clarkson over Conley and Royce? Mind-boggling lineup decision-making. I agree. I'm not necessarily sure if Conley was the issue But one thing you appreciate about Jordan Clarkson is if everyone is going to be bad defensively and Conley isn't going to take the pull-up threes, which is part of the issue he's unplayable today, is he wasn't doing any of the good things offensively, right? He's not doing those pull-up threes like we used to see last year and the year before. He would, even when he was shooting poorly when he first came to Utah, he would have these step-back threes and he would shoot a three in the face of a big, or he would really take guys off the dribble, and he really had that penetrative ability that he just did not have today. So if he's unplayable from an offensive perspective, and nobody can guard Jalen Brunson defensively, it's not like Dallas was providing complicated offensive sets that Jordan Clarkson can't keep up with. You put Jordan Clarkson out there and you task him with one thing: stay in front of the fucking guy. And Clarkson's defensive issues are always around defending that second, third, and fourth action. If you tell him, hey, go on Jalen Brunson and just use your 6'6 frame to just be long and annoying, Clarkson can do that. Clarkson is also a sneaky good thing that Clarkson is he's not necessarily strong, but he has a good base. So if Jalen Brunson, when he puts his elbow into Royce and Bojan, or any of those larger guys who ended up switched on to him, those guys are tall enough and kind of like burly enough that they kind of, if they get sent the wrong way defending a guy like Brunson, they're out of bounds. They're gone, right? Brunson doesn't exactly have a Paul George level push off with his elbow, but he really burrows in there. The Dallas Mavericks play-by-play guy, he used the word burrows to define a point guard on either team. He used it for Mitchell and Conley too. For anyone who really gets into the paint and was able to kind of figure out a way to get a layup amongst the trees. I love that phrase, burrows. I also have a lot of respect for good play-by-play announcing. When Brunson was able to burrow against O'Neal and Bojan or any other larger player, he could really get those guys out of the action. Clarkson is a guy who really keeps his balance. Like, you shove him, and he might get knocked out of the way a bit, but he is very good at contesting shots. So to your point about why wasn't Clarkson in over Conley, I don't know. I think I kind of liked where they were going in the fourth quarter, saying, like, Conley, you don't have it today, and sitting him down. They brought him back with a minute and a half left to no effect, and he was just as bad as he was before. All right, the head on this beer is settled down, so I'm finally going to take a sip, take a breath. Welcome to Salt City Hoops Postcast. Holy fucking shit. So, Daniel House over Royce. I just mentioned earlier, I thought Daniel House played really good shutdown, ball denying defense on Jalen Brunson, and I think he should have been out there as much as possible. It's also possible that you just got tired. It was very, very frustrating. DS also mentioned that Clarkson and Conley with fouls, you had Clarkson with 5 fouls and Conley with 4 fouls. You mentioned that Quinn was playing it safe with them on fouls. That, frankly, didn't even register with me that they were in legit remotely foul trouble at all, because with those guys, you gotta just trust that they're not gonna foul out of the game, and if they do, they can sub in for each other, right? Just go with it. It didn't register with me that those guys had any sort of foul trouble whatsoever, because they were doing a pretty decent job defensively. I'm not going to ask them, Clarkson was doing a decent job defensively. And to the extent you're worried about Conley's 4 fouls, but you don't trust him enough to begin with, just let the guy foul out of the fucking game then. The other narrative today that really, I think my reaction to it is sad, is Donovan, especially in the first half, that dude was looking for Rudy Gobert. Donovan Mitchell was clearly coached, and that's something they clearly worked on in film, to give Rudy Gobert the fucking basketball. Just pass him the ball. If it's a bad lob attempt, I don't care. If you feel like you have the pressure on you, Donovan, as a ball handler, guess where the pressure isn't? On Rudy Gobert, who's being guarded by some idiot 6-footer. Just give him the basketball. That was clearly a coaching point today. And I don't know any Jazz fan who wouldn't have their heart just melt at the sight of all 4 times, which is a lot. By the way, I should mention, like, four passes from Donovan to Rudy in a scoring opportunity is actually a lot over any ball game for any ball handler, right? Like, those are pretty clutch assists. That's actually a significant amount. I'm not jokingly saying that the 4 times is a low amount. That's actually a healthy amount of passes. Donovan threw 3 lobs and 1 pocket pass to Rudy. All 4 opportunities were obvious Gobert scoring opportunities. The 3 lobs, he was on top of the rim. He was going to dunk over Kleba or Dwight Powell. And the pocket pass was just straight into Gobert's chest. Go up, he gets a dunk. Gobert botched all of them. It was... My heart melted at each one. Just melted. I don't think Donovan and Rudy have this weird parasocial relationship where they're friends in public and they just want to murder each other in private. I think they just kind of coexist. So I don't think it's anything more than bad basketball play. But just as I try in these postcasts, I try to bridge between the actual X's and O's of what happens versus what you feel as a fan, right? And over the past 3 weeks, 4 weeks really, it's just been knives to the fans' hearts to really see how the Donovan-Rudy dynamic has just been torn apart more and more and more, to the point where if the Jazz don't make the finals, let alone win the finals this year, this is the last time we get Donovan and Rudy together. And when you see Donovan making a conscious effort to give Rudy Gobert the basketball on plays that Rudy finishes his entire, post-Ty Corbin career, and him not catching the ball and not dunking the ball the way he does with any other player who's ever passed him the ball, the way Donovan has passed him the ball in the past, you just see the narrative just like spotlight. And there's only a spotlight on those 2 guys on the court, and it just really sucked to watch. So Gobert had 8 points today. 4 turnovers. He was 2 of 5 from the field. Gobert was, and 4 turnovers. Part of that reason was the team was making a conscious effort to find Rudy in the short roll before the help from the corner came, so Gobert could make a pass. And twice Gobert made the pass he's been instructed to his entire life, of just quickly get it to the corner. And he's actually quite adept at recognizing when overhelp is coming from the wing to the corner, and instead of giving that pass to the wing, I know I'm giving a ton of fucking words right now to you guys to understand that Rudy's good on the short roll when he's passing the ball, and he was unable to complete those passes. He had 4 turnovers today. He got stripped a lot. He was unable to get baskets when the team was getting him the ball. That was really frustrating to watch. As a fan, I hope when they go into film over the next couple days, they look at that and they say, this worked. This would have been a working play. I hope. Oh, what else we got here today? I'm just a little sad. I'm trying to catch up on the actual basketball that happened. For those clamoring for House over Royce, you're still not wrong today. House a plus 17 to 21 minutes. Royce a minus 16 in 37 minutes. Royce shot 4 of 6 from 3 today. That was good for Royce. That was good Royce basketball. He had 9 rebounds. The issue with Royce is not Royce O'Neal at this point. The issue is Quinn's deployment of Royce O'Neal. And this is just... when Luka comes back in the game, I don't think Royce O'Neal would be a particularly good matchup for Luka. But Luka at least is not somebody who's going to race around a screen and totally kick Royce O'Neal's ass by just getting to the rim in a lightning flash, and Royce can't keep up. Royce can keep up with Luka. And Royce can battle Luka on post-ups. Luka's a very good post-up player. That's his new skill that he's really destroyed people with this year, is Luka post-ups. And And Royce, I think, will be able to compete with Luka when that happens, but he's just not a Jalen Brunson defender. Okay? That should be a Daniel House job. I don't think the Jazz can afford, at this point, especially if Luka doesn't play, just throwing out random assholes like Nickeil Alexander-Walker to defend Jalen Brunson. But I do think that it's not the craziest thing if you're... we all know the definition of insanity. Doing something that doesn't work over and over and over again and expecting different results. And Jared Butler is a poor defender. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, in his professional career, has been a mediocre defender. He came out of Virginia Tech with a reputation as a fabulous defender, kind of like Donovan Mitchell coming out of Louisville, like this guard defender type that can really cause problems. If your Jazz perimeter guys are exhausted, or if Daniel House, a guy who's played sparingly this year before he got to the Jazz, if he's exhausted and you don't trust O'Neal, Conley, Mitchell, Clarkson to guard Brunson, and you need to give those guys a break, or you need to give House a break, is there a problem with Nickeil Alexander-Walker playing for 2, 3, 4 minutes to just be an asshole on Brunson and not commit a foul and just make his life difficult? There's options here. There are options here. You want to point to Maxi Kleber shooting 8 of 11 from 3. That'll never happen again. The Jazz should have won this game. Kleber's 8 for 11 might have been a fluke, but Conley's 0 points was not a fluke. Like, that was not an aberration. Conley was not missing wide open shots. Conley wasn't beating guys off the dribble and just missing layups. He had a couple missed shots that he usually makes, but otherwise, Conley sucked. And Kleber is a guy who has that ceiling. So you can't point to these games being like, oh, that was a total aberration. Brunson's 41 points. Sam Vecini, who's I forget who he writes for these days, but he's a great, he's a smart NBA media guy. Let me put it that way. I think he's primarily a draft guy, but he expressed surprise that Brunson got 41 points. But he accurately said that it didn't feel like Dallas was doing anything bizarre to get those 41 points. It felt like they were playing within their system, and then Kleber shot 8 threes and Brunson scored 41 points. He's exactly right. The Jazz didn't face like a bunch of random contested threes that went in. That the Mavericks, as they did in Game 1, they forced Utah off the three-point line. They couldn't shoot their threes, and then they just got whatever they wanted offensively. It's entirely predictable. If they lost, the Jazz could be down 0-2 right now. Isn't that insane to think? And they're a good basketball team. CJ Stevens says, seeing Josh Green and Kleber parked in the corner on offense gives me a riddling case of PTSD. You're not wrong. I felt that with Josh Green in Game 1. He goes 0-4 from 3. Wide open shots. They didn't even bother remotely contesting him, and he wasn't close on any one of them. So I get that with Josh Green. But with Maxi Kleber, you do have to play a little differently. Josh Green, by the 0-2 from 3 today, he was 1 of 5 for 2 points. His 1 2-point make was when he got the ball wide open in the 3-point on the corner. He took 3 dribbles in, and Gobert backpedaled because he just assumed, Josh Green, you can't shoot. You're going to come try to dunk over me or something like that. And Josh Green just shot like a 20-foot or like 19-foot mid-range jumper, and it went in. Okay, that's fine. Don't worry about that. Kleber parked in the corner? Yeah. That's got to be some different defense. Kleber's a bad enough shooter that you still want to have Gobert out there, but you want to have Gobert guarding Dorian Finney-Smith. Not necessarily because Finney-Smith is a worse shooter. I don't think he's appreciably worse than Kleber. I just think the way you have your offense, when they had Kleba in the corner, it made more sense to me. This goes back to the Terrence Mann thing, and you're right. This does have PTSD. Because let me talk about what I felt like the defensive adjustment should have been in the Clippers series and what kind of happened against Dallas here, right? So if you get perimeter penetration and Gobert needs to go into the paint, the 5-alarm fire that needs to start for Jazz defense is you need to send whoever the wing defender is immediately to the strong side corner. You need to have the corner shooters just locked down. Maxi Kleba's better than Terrence Mann out there. And Bojan needs to sprint, or whoever's guarding the wing shooter, which is a Reggie Bullock type who's a good shooter, I understand that. But when you have a Jalen Brunson who is an okay, good passer, but not a fabulous passer, you would have last season, we had Paul George and Reggie Jackson. They were the drivers. Good passers, not fabulous passers. When they're driving in and they see Gobert at the rim, they're not going to try to score over him. They're going to look to the corner. And if they try to look to the corner and you have your corners marked, they have to midair decide or make a very tough basketball deceleration stop and pass to the corner. And if they stop or go midair, there is no center in the history of the NBA who is better at going from the rim to the wing with lightning speed than Rudy Gobert. And let's say you got Reggie Bullock on the wing, okay? Let's say you got Kleba in the corner, Bullock on the wing. Jalen Brunson drives. He beats his man because Jazz don't have anybody to defend them. Brunson beats his man, sees Gobert in the paint, and says, well, I'm going to pass to Kleba. He's made 6 threes today. He's in the corner. I know exactly where he is. And Brunson sees Bojan sprinting to the corner and knows his pass is going to be picked off if he passes to that corner 3 of Finney Smith or Kleba. So he kicks it to the wing. And there's Bullock. And as he's getting that, first of all, Brunson has to make that pass, which is directly behind him. Okay? That's a difficult pass to make. We've seen Donovan make those passes before, and we always fawn and melt in our seats when Donovan makes that pass behind him. They are difficult passes to make. So first he's got to hit that pass accurately. And unless Brunson hits that pass directly in Bullock's shooting pocket, Bullock's got to kind of collect that pass, and before he can shoot a 3, Rudy Gobert is on his ass, because Rudy Gobert now is in the paint, and because Brunson has passed the ball out from the penetration, either the guy he has beat, let's call it Donovan Mitchell, either the guy Brunson has beat, Donovan Mitchell, is now able to easily contest that Bullock 3, or Mitchell sticks on Brunson all the way through to really try to make that layup challenging, and Gobert switches out and goes to the wing. This is not a difficult defensive rotation to adjust. You just have to coach your team to sell out to the corner 3. Kleba hit a shitload of corner 3s today. Drove us all fucking insane. Riley O'Brien, are you Irish? Comments in the thread. I love this team, but they're so damn weak. I'm stoked for Thursday, ... I guess. Here's what we haven't had this series. Home game. Dallas crowd was way better than I thought on Saturday for a 1 o'clock game. Mavs crowd was great. The Mavs bench is great. These guys haven't been home in Utah yet. And if they don't have Luka Doncic, this should be an easy win for Utah. It was today, and I should be careful with my words. But Utah will be at home on Thursday. And so that leaves me a little bit more optimistic for Thursday. Calf injuries are tough. I mentioned this the other day. They're not easy injuries to just fly back from, and especially when you're a ball handler where you have to push off of it. There's a high degree of re-injury. I have a pretty strong inkling that if Doncic tries to come back on Thursday, he might re-injure it, or at least he'll be 80%, which again, to that point about Royce O'Neal and who he can guard, nobody can really stop Luka Doncic, but someone can really, stay in front of him a little bit better than that. So that's where I go from here. This is Jazz Postcast. Loss against the Mavericks. Bogdanovich was fine today. They didn't go to that post-up as much as they had in the past. I thought he could have passed more out of the post-ups that they did offer him, but it just wasn't available for him today. That's fine. Gobert was fine defensively. He gave up a lot of layups. Not a lot. He gave up, I think, maybe 2 or 3 layups off of ball handlers in isolation, which I have for the entire year espoused that he is very good at guarding ball handlers in isolation. And Dinwiddie has exposed him a couple times on that, which was really disappointing to see. A lot of Kleber's threes. I don't know how many exactly, but Hassan Whiteside was really disappointing contesting those perimeter shots. He, as soon as he saw Kleber kind of get the ball on the perimeter, he just said, all right, guess this guy is shooting the ball. And it's like, all right, like that's pretty disappointing to see. Like, just can he give some token defense on that? And like that's not Hassan Whiteside's game. I would never go into any game thinking, oh, Hassan, he's really gonna stretch out to 3 and really give these really hard closeouts on guys he was coached not to defend. Right? He was clearly coached, don't guard Maxi Kleber, and that's fine. Reasons for optimism. Let's talk about some optimistic things. Do we like optimistic things? I like optimistic things. So optimistically, the Mavericks start Dwight Powell over Maxi Kleber for a reason. Dwight Powell is just way better than Maxi Kleber defensively, rolling to the rim. And when you have a 5-out offense, it really does kind of expose you on some of the other things you can't do, right? And you can't have that size around the rim. And if the Jazz rotate correctly around the perimeter, Gobert on the inside is still a massive advantage against many teams. So I'm still very optimistic about the fact that they just didn't feel like they could play Dwight Powell today. Second, they got the Mavericks in foul trouble. Dinwiddie had 4 fouls early in the second quarter, and they just rode with him. He still played 40 minutes today. Part of the reason not having Conley in the game, I think, was an issue, is they were unable to attack Spencer Dinwiddie appropriately when he had 4 fouls. Because if Spencer Dinwiddie goes out of the game, if they foul him out, that's a win for the Jazz. It's a huge win. When they just were unable to attack him today. Big foul trouble for the Mavericks today. Finney Smith finished with 5 fouls. How's that for a little bit of a tongue twister there, especially when you've had a couple drinks. Like I said, we're going home. Trey Burke played 5 minutes. There's a flashback. He was terrible. He hit the first shot he made. It was a 3-pointer, but he was just total roast meat defensively. Look, this team's going to be going on the road. Huge minutes for this team. 42 minutes for Dorian Finney-Smith. 45 minutes for Reggie Bullock, who is the primary defender on one of the 2 Jazz good perimeter players. That's way too many minutes. 40 minutes for Dinwiddie. 42 minutes for Brunson. Maxi Kleber has had a litany of injuries throughout his career. He started off his career with a pretty brutal ACL injury, if I recall correctly, and he's 30 years old. Yeah, it's not too old. But like that guy can't play 32 minutes from what we've seen in his career. The Jazz really sucked to lose this game. But they still have the advantage going this series. I'm not as concerned about Luka Doncic coming back as others because I do think that he like a limited Luka Doncic is something that the Jazz can handle. And I'm not particularly worried about it. I'm doing deep breaths here. Sorry. Jonathan Dieska asks, legit question I think should be the main problem. Why has Donovan been so bad in the clutch? Well, I think in other games it's been tunnel vision, right? Like you'll see him just drive to the paint and just have no idea what he's doing with the ball other than scoring the ball. And if he's got good defense, he rises up for those contested mid-range shots. It's not like he has a bad field goal percentage out of luck. He's making bad decisions with the basketball. And if Conley is going to be this ineffective as an off-ball point guard, that makes Donovan's job way harder. And if Gobert is not catching the basketball, that makes Donovan's job way harder. Because a turnover because your center dropped the ball is just, when you can shoot a 40% shot, that becomes really difficult for me to really criticize Donovan about. But he shot 30 shots today. Not all of them were great. A lot of them were poor. His defense was actually kind of okay. It was bad down the stretch in the fourth quarter because he was tired, had an offensive load, guys were blowing by him. But kind of in the middle of the game when Royce O'Neal is bad guarding Brunson from the jump, right? So that's part of the reason I get annoyed. And Mitchell, when he was fresh, was able to guard Dinwiddie or Brunson pretty effectively, as much as you can expect. Kind of staying in front of him, contesting. Brunson made a few baskets, like that's fine. And down the stretch, when Clarkson subbed out of the game, they were just hunting Mitchell as the worst defender. And I thought he was okay defending a lot of that stuff. Is what it is. Hernan Gomez was the guy who played the 4 in those Conley, Clarkson, Gobert minutes, which I don't think Quinn Snyder really needs to go away from him in Game 3. As far as like that lineup being a thing, like Conley, Clarkson, and Gobert. I do think the Mavericks are playing pretty small. And I do think it's time for Rudy Gay to mash some people the way he can. It's up to the coach to kind of see what he sees in these people, but I did not have an issue with Hernan Gomez today. He shot and missed a wide open 3, and that's going to happen. Hernan Gomez a plus 14 in those 7 minutes. House a plus 17 in those 21 minutes he played. And that's not the end all be all. And Conley, out of the starters, in his 22 minutes was a minus 7. Right? So we're going to look at the tape, and it's going to be a Conley, Gobert, Hernan Gomez, House, and Clarkson lineup is going to be massively positive, like a plus 14 today. And that's because the Mavericks just have no depth. And again, they're playing Reggie Bullock 45 fucking minutes today. Even with Luka Doncic back, I mean, how does the math really change? Right? These guys are still going to be playing 38, 39 minutes. These guys are going to be tired, and they're going to be playing at altitude in Utah. I expect a Game 3 win for Utah. I just feel really shitty right now. Is all. That's all I really have for today. So, got Game 3 on Thursday. We do have a requested speaker, Davion, on the Twitter Spaces. I'll let you come in, Davion, if you're here. Davion, are you with us?
I'm a Mavs fan. I have nothing against the Jazz, right?
What up?
Pitted up against each other in the playoff series, right? So the biggest thing with the Jazz is right now is Rudy Gobert. That's the big difference maker. Like he's a big factor in this series, and the reason that the Mavs are playing small ball and you have to run Bullock that many minutes, you have to run Dorian that many minutes, is because we don't have very many options on wings. And we can't play our triple guard lineup because there's no Luka. So when you run that 5 wide with the wings and Maxey, you force Rudy Gobert out of the paint, which is why Jalen Brunson and Dinwiddie were able to do what they did. So there's a reason for everything. It's like we knew it was going to happen. But you're right, though. 44 minutes it's going to be hard to keep that up for the whole series because it's not easy. But I do think if anybody's going to do it, it's those two dudes.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, and I've mentioned that when you have these 5-out lineups, it's not that Gobert cannot play against these lineups. It's that if you're going to have them, you have to have two things in order for it to be successful for Utah. One, which is easy, which is on the offensive end, right? You get a lineup that if Gobert is playing at center and you're going against a Maxi Kleber who cannot play above the rim, you have to be able to take advantage of that. But what you're getting at is the Mavs on offense. And I provided a way that the Jazz defense should have been able to react to it, and I'm curious about your thoughts. And for anyone who didn't hear it on the YouTube, Davion is asking, hey, the issue with Gobert is, you're playing 5 out, and if you got 5 perimeter shooters, that forces Gobert out of the paint. Brunson drives and he's able to get into the paint, and Brunson is able to either score or kick it out to the man that Gobert has to leave, which in this case was usually Maxi Kleber. And my reaction to that is, well, if you have Gobert help in the paint, then you have to completely shut off the corner 3 availability. You have to have your wing defenders who are guarding usually Dorian Finney-Smith and Reggie Bullock, or Spencer Dinwiddie and Reggie Bullock, and you have to have those defenders sell out to prevent the corner 3 from happening. And if Jalen Brunson or Spencer Dinwiddie, whoever is driving the basketball, is able to recognize that the corner 3 has been shut off, and they're able to make that behind the back whirling 180 pass to the wing, who will typically be wide open, then I think that's the hat that you tip your cap to, is to say, great pass. That is a pass I do not, personally, this is me, Mark, talking, I do not trust Brunson or Dinwiddie, and last year, I do not trust Paul George or Reggie Jackson to be able to make that pass. And if they do, if they're able to make those passes, one of two things can happen. Either the man who got fucking torched by Jalen Brunson or Spencer Dinwiddie, usually Conley, Clarkson, or Mitchell, they either got so torched that they can also easily U-turn and contest that wing 3, or Rudy Gobert, a skill that is just unmatched from a center that we've seen in the past decade, except for, I can't even go down the list right now. Gobert can get from the rim to guarding that wing 3 in a hurry. And unless Brunson or Dinwiddie puts that ball right in the shooting pocket via a very difficult 180-degree pass, that shot will be very difficult to get off openly. Do you have any thoughts on my thoughts on how you're able to prevent my idea on if Gobert has to suck into the paint and sag off of Maxi Kleber or Dorian Finney-Smith in the corner, is that a good defensive idea that I have, or what do you think?
It just comes down to defensive rotations. The Jazz aren't rotating properly on defense. The amount of corner 3s, I think I saw a stat earlier. Don't quote me on this. The Mavs had 18 uncontested 3s go in or something like that. We shot almost 50 threes this game. That was obviously the game plan was to do exactly what it did, and it worked. The thing is, it just comes down to defensive rotation. Your person that's guarding the person on the wing needs to rotate properly to guard the person in the corner, and you just rotate on defense. You got to start switching more, and that's the issue that they were having more than anything. But exactly what you're saying is exactly correct. They just need to actually switch it, or they needed to run that zone. They were running a 2-3 zone earlier in the third quarter, and it worked pretty well for them for a couple possessions, and then they stopped doing it. So it was like one of the two things need to happen. I think the problem, the biggest issue, is your guard defensively. Mike Conley got in foul trouble early, so he was out, and I think he's your best defensive guard. Jordan Clarkson is great on offense, not as great on defense. Donovan Mitchell has his moments. He's just a freak athlete, so he's going to make plays, but he did not stay in front of Brunson. He couldn't stay in front of Dinwiddie all game. So it was like, it all comes down to defensive rotations and how your defense rotates, and that comes down a lot to your Royce O'Neals, your Bogdanoviches, those guys who are on the wings. Who else got it? Daniel House, I believe, is the other guy that plays wing for you guys. Those are the guys that need to be rotating and making those plays, because Dorian Finney-Smith got open threes, Maxi Kleber got open threes, and Daniel House, Bogdanovich are tall enough to contest that jumper and athletic enough for sure.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points there. So I'll try to summarize it for anyone on the YouTube who didn't quite hear any of that. I got Davey on. I'm a Mavericks fan. Thanks for joining. And I think I got your audio on the YouTube, but just in case we haven't heard it, mention that it was about rotations for one, about the Jazz, and that we think that the Mavericks got 18 open threes today, which it certainly felt like it. That's for sure. But yeah, that kind of gets to what I was saying earlier about, like, if you're able to more aggressively rotate to the corner three and force the guard to make a more difficult pass, well, can the Jazz make that one simple rotation for my benefit? And then from there, what you were saying about Royce and Bojan and those sort of wing defenders, I'm just assuming they have no hope. Mike Conley in foul trouble as a good guard defender, those days are 7 years behind him at this point. Like, he came out of Ohio State with the inverse of the reputation he has now. Mike Conley coming out of Ohio State was a fabulous small defender, pesky defender who was also a maestro at the pick and roll and couldn't really shoot outside. And now Conley can't defend anything. He doesn't gamble defensively. He doesn't have quick hands defensively, and he on offense, as far as shooting, he can shoot the basketball now, which is a great switch for Conley. But he can't defend anybody. So it's really all about rotations, and rotations are a mental thing, not a physical thing. And I think when Mitchell has too much of an offensive tax on him, Conley with his age and his stature, Bojan's a little bit slower. Royce O'Neal is stocky. He's never been a good guard of a good defender of quick guards. These guys can't mano a mano, sorry, I am extremely American, guard the perimeter players penetrating the paint. But they are smart players. That's what I'm getting to. These guys are smart players. And when you're saying, can the Jazz rotate? Can the Jazz get to perimeter shooters without forcing them to be wide open? I think they can. They're fast enough to do so. And that's what I'm hoping we'll see. Really appreciate a Mavericks guy coming in. We got one other requester coming in, if you don't mind. And we'll get JS on the line. Jess, I think we got you. What's going on, man?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, I kind of wanted to switch the topic from the defense to the offense. Obviously, the defensive struggles have been well known in the Jazz history. I know everyone's tweeting about it. But one thing I wanted to ask, I didn't get to watch the game. I only got to listen to it on 97.5. But why didn't the Jazz start attacking the offense with Spencer Dinwiddie getting on switches? He had 4 fouls, I think, early in the third quarter. I was wondering why didn't they didn't take him out, and he started cooking up. We were up 10 when he got his 4th foul.
Sorry to cut you off there real quick. I thought you had concluded your sentence. I'm sorry. But yes, I mentioned that earlier, is that when Spencer Dinwiddie got his 4th foul, I thought that the Jazz continued an attack on Jalen Brunson or Davis Bertans when he was out there. And I thought to myself in that third quarter, just like you did, JS, if the Mavericks don't have Spencer Dinwiddie for even 6 minutes or 5 minutes or 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, because he is either fouled out or Kidd has subbed him out with 5 fouls, that would have been a massive advantage for the Jazz. Because then Kidd would have been forced with an option if he has Dinwiddie out of the game. Either you play Kleba and Powell together, which he tried in the second quarter of last game once, which was interesting, and I mean, you play good basketball players when you got them, right? Or you play Josh Green, who has been miserable this series and is somewhere for Rudy Gobert to hide and doesn't have to worry about shooting a three. Or you play Trey Burke, who, as Jazz fans and Mavericks fans both know, sucks ass at basketball. So I completely agree with you, JS, that I think a really good option for the Jazz could have been really attacking Spencer Dinwiddie, especially because the Mavericks defense was switching quite a bit. And if Donovan Mitchell wanted that opportunity, or any other player who draws fouls, like Jordan Clarkson drew a couple fouls on Dinwiddie, or I think this is stupid and it shows how much of a basketball dork I am about this whole thing. My favorite foul that the Jazz drew on Dinwiddie this entire game was when the Mavericks ended up with Gobert on Dinwiddie, and the only thing Dinwiddie could do was hack at Gobert and hope to get a steal. And, Dinwiddie complained about the foul. Maybe it wasn't quite a foul. But whenever you get a guard guarding a big guy like Gobert, the refs, the officials' attention starts to go up. About, I don't know, this guard can't quite defend this larger player. Let me look for fouls a little bit more, and that's how Dinwiddie got I think that was his fourth foul. So I completely agree with you that was a great way for the Jazz to get an additional foul on Dinwiddie and take more advantage of the game, and they just did not do that. So I agree with you on that one.
Yeah. So, I heard you mention that, but I just didn't know if that was my only concern. I have another question, if that's okay if I ask it.
Hit me.
So in the fourth quarter, obviously Donovan has had his fourth quarter struggles, but going 2 for 10, maybe he's not watching the same game I am. Where do we find Bogdanovich? Where do we find someone else to get rolling? Because I know we were kind of struggling in that fourth quarter, but 2 for 10 is just kind of a pattern, It's kind of maybe even a habit, if you will. I don't want
to... sorry, I muted you too quickly again, but I will say that and I hate to do that to you. I'm sorry, I hit the button too quickly.
You're fine.
But when you talk about Bojan getting the ball, 2 possessions late, if you were listening to 97.5, they started every possession with Bojan going in isolation, and he hit 2 very tough mid-range jumpers over the contested hands of a defender. They did initiate possessions with Bogdanovich, and I'm sitting here scratching my head like I agree with you, JS, that we absolutely need to get other players going, but it doesn't mean just throwing the ball randomly to a guy and saying go in isolation, right? And that's exactly what Utah did by giving the ball to Bojan and saying, okay, be an isolation player. Donovan is a fabulous isolation player. Our issues with Donovan are not him having the ball and dribbling and being the focal primary facilitator of the offense. It's what he does after that. and he shoots these contested mid-range shots. He gets triple teamed on a shot and doesn't find the open man. And instead, Quinn Snyder kind of looked at the personnel for the Mavericks. He looked at the personnel for the Jazz and said, well, I'm going to have Bojan Bogdanović take his guy isolation. And he made a couple very difficult shots, but I didn't feel good about either of them going in. And I felt like they were mid-range 2-pointers. And I felt like, well, if you have Donovan initiating the offense and playing like Donovan can do, we can get 3-pointers out of it. And that just didn't happen today. So I agree with you, like, get the ball out of his hands, maybe do some different things. I just think if you initiate the ball, if you initiate the action with Mike Conley, who again he had out of the game for defensive purposes, you might have an opportunity to play it better offensively, which is this is I have no concluding thought for you other than you're right.
No, I appreciate the time. Thank you. Have a good one.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah, Davion, I was just about to unmute you there. What you got? This is Mavericks fan Davion asking about Bojan taking isolation shots at the end or Donovan sucking ass in the clutch.
This is actually really isn't even a question. This is more of an observation. Are we sure it's mostly talent on the floor and not Quinn Snyder's fault? I have nothing against the Jazz, and I've watched a lot of Jazz basketball, more than I can count this season for unknown reasons as a Mavs fan. But I've watched enough Jazz basketball to know that when they stray away from the pick and roll and they go into ISO ball, because Donovan's really good. Donovan, again, is a freak athlete. He is insanely talented. And Bojan had Spencer Dinwiddie on him, so he should be taking ISO ball against him, especially when he has 4 fouls where Dinwiddie couldn't take risks there. The thing is that they were straying away from the Rudy Gobert pick and roll, which was working a lot early game. Just Rudy wasn't finishing at the rim when he was supposed to. So it was like, I think they needed to go back to that and get switches to the point where they were finding the mismatches when Donovan was dropped. Like, he dropped 30-something points tonight off of those switches. He was getting Reggie Bullock off of him. He was getting Dorian off of him, who are the best Mavericks defenders, and they weren't doing those switches to get those people off of him. He was just taking it on people that are easily the best defenders on the Mavs. And I think that's what made it hard on them in ISO ball. And Quinn Snyder just stopped running his first 3.5 quarters of offense that was working for them and winning them the basketball game.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair observation. I was actually very surprised that we went to Bojan in isolation just as a matter of course, right? Especially because it didn't involve putting Bojan in that post position that we saw in Game 1, that we saw a lot of success out of. Like, you can put Bojan in the post, and if you're going to initiate the action out of Bogdanovic there, Donovan still has an opportunity to get the ball and do a weak side pick and roll, and you can do a lot of things with it. Just to give Bojan the ball on the perimeter and just said, go do something, felt very odd to me. And that is something I do put on Quinn Snyder, to your point. Like, how much of this do I put on Quinn Snyder? A fair bit, right? Because if it's Donovan making bad decisions versus what kind of plays are working versus what isn't working, what do the Mavericks have out there, what can we exploit, what can I tell my team in these timeouts, what the fuck is happening in these timeouts, right? Like, there's a lot of ways for this entire situation to be managed better by Quinn Snyder. If your star player doesn't have it, if your star player is making bad decisions, do you have the relationship equity to put your hand in his face and say, this isn't working, we need to have Conley initiate this action, which is what we saw in Game 1, right? Like, when things were kind of falling apart for Donovan, like that very terrible turnover with 3-4 minutes left to go, Conley got the ball, initiated the action, had Kleba on his heels, and hit an 18-foot jumper from straight away that was just bread and butter for Conley. So I don't mind Bojan initiating the offense because he's our second leading scorer, but he's partially a dependent threat, right? Like, he's a catch and shoot shooter. He's a post masher. He's not a guy you're going to toss to the perimeter and say, go with it. And so, yeah, the Mitchell Gobert pick and roll was working, and if Mitchell doesn't necessarily trust Gobert to catch his passes, well, he didn't trust him for the other 82 fucking games of the season, so go ahead and go at it. And go because of Gobert's screening ability and his gravity, and because they have Maxi Kleba out there instead of Dwight Powell, Donovan Mitchell's going to have a little bit better opportunity to score the basketball. And if the Mavericks are going to switch anything, and you put Kleba or any other non-Finney Smith defender in a switch action, then okay, you got Donovan Mitchell going against Reggie Bullock, who's a solid defender, but he's not Finney Smith. Or anybody else that Mitchell wants to target, whether it be Brunson or Dinwiddie. And so I do think there's some coaching issues going on here in the clutch. It's what we've said all season, is that these players are good enough to make these plays. And sometimes it comes down to this fourth quarter offense, which is just Donovan's eyes go black and Quinn Snyder's unable to put his hands on his shoulders and say, let's try something different. And today, when he did try something different, it was, Bojan Bogdanovic, can you please do something you're not good at? So, this was a very frustrating loss. We're going to sign off for today because we've had a lot of talk. Ooh, this was a good one. Really appreciate Davion and JS for pitching on Spaces. Jonathan, Riley, CJ, thank you for commenting on our YouTube. What a terrible day for Jazz fans, but I'm pretty optimistic about how this thing will go going forward. Yeah, let's.
Anything like the first two games is going to be a bloodbath. The series has been fun to watch. Even game one felt like it was in the air still.
Yeah, let's see if we get Luka back and make this a thing. And I'm really appreciative for a good series, and I do want Luka back because I think that does test the Jazz and all that good stuff. But right now I'm a little sad, and I'm just gonna kick my feet up and try to enjoy. I'm hoping the other game is any good, or I haven't even checked the score of this one yet. 20-point game, end of the third quarter. It looks like I'll be going to bed early and reading a book. So y'all have a good one. Thank you for tuning in to Salt City Hoops live postcast. Hopefully we get a win on Thursday. Y'all have a good night.